Why did my disabled dad point at my husband on our wedding day and say, absolutely not, anyone but you? My dad had a stroke when I was 15. It left him partially paralyzed and took away most of his ability to speak. He could say maybe 10 words total, and even those came out slurred and difficult to understand. For 7 years, he communicated mostly through pointing, nodding, and this little whiteboard he kept with him everywhere. So when I got engaged to my boyfriend Chris after dating for 3 years, I knew telling dad would be different than a normal father-daughter moment. Chris and I went to visit on a Sunday afternoon. I was so nervous my hands were shaking. Chris sat next to dad on the couch while I showed him the ring. Dad looked at it, then looked at Chris, then back at me. He smiled and gave me a thumbs up. I thought that was it. His blessing, we were good to go. We started planning the wedding immediately. 6 months of choosing flowers, booking venues, sending invitations. Dad seemed happy whenever we talked about it. He'd nod along when I showed him photos of my dress, gave a thumbs up when we told him about the catering menu. The morning of the wedding, Dad was sitting in the front row of the church in his wheelchair. My Aunt Karen was next to him, making sure he was comfortable. Everything was perfect. The music started, and I began walking down the aisle, holding my uncle's arm since Dad couldn't walk me down himself. I could see Chris standing at the altar looking nervous and excited. Then I heard this loud sound from the front row. Dad was yelling. Not words, just this desperate sound that made everyone turn and look. My aunt was trying to calm him down, but he was pointing directly at Chris and shaking his head violently. I stopped walking. The whole church went silent. Dad kept pointing at Chris with his good arm, and then he spoke. His voice was loud and clear, clearer than I'd heard it in 7 years. Absolutely not. Anyone but you. Everyone gasped. I just stood there frozen in the middle of the aisle. Chris looked like he'd been slapped. My aunt rushed over to Dad, but he pushed her away and kept pointing. I ran to his wheelchair, kneeling down in my wedding dress. Dad, what's wrong? What are you saying? He grabbed my hand and pointed at Chris again, then made a gesture like he was writing. My aunt handed him his whiteboard and a marker. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it, but he managed to write 2 words. Fire. House. I didn't understand. What fire? What house? Dad kept writing, his letters getting messier. Your apartment. Him. My stomach dropped. In 2019, there was a small fire in my apartment building. Faulty wiring in the unit below mine caused smoke damage to my place. I wasn't home when it happened. I'd been at Chris's place that night. The fire department said if I had been sleeping there, the smoke might have killed me. But what did that have to do with Chris? Dad wrote more. I watched. Started it. Chris started the fire? That was insane. The fire department ruled it as an accident, but Dad wasn't done writing. Insurance. Money. He wanted you dead. The church erupted into chaos. People were yelling, some were crying, my mom was screaming at my aunt to call someone. Chris tried to run, but my cousins tackled him right there in the church, held him down while someone called the police. I just sat there on the floor next to Dad's wheelchair, my dress spread around me, trying to process what was happening. Later at the police station, everything came out. Chris had taken out a life insurance policy on me 6 months before the fire, made himself the beneficiary by forging my signature. He'd been gambling, owed money to some dangerous people, and saw me as his way out. The fire was supposed to look like an accident, but the wiring was faulty anyway, so his plan failed when it got blamed on that instead of his tampering. Dad had been investigating for years. He couldn't communicate it well enough to make anyone listen, but he'd been gathering evidence, working with a private investigator he hired using his disability settlement money. He had bank statements, text messages, everything. He just couldn't find a way to tell me that I'd understand until that moment when he saw Chris standing at the altar about to become my husband. The stroke had taken Dad's words, but it didn't take his ability to protect his daughter. Chris is in prison now, serving 15 years for attempted murder and insurance fraud. Dad and I meet for lunch every Sunday, and I bought him a tablet with a text-to-speech app. He's got a lot more to say now.